Okay.
You know what? Grandfather could tell you more about it. He was going to start explaining how many places there are in the world. And grandfather's been more places probably than you have. But you know what? We've got a little video that I'd like to show you that I think will encourage you. Grandfather, Mincaye, has not only come up here to speak to you, but we've been to Europe twice. We've been to Panama when you're making a movie. He went up there to help them get it right so that the Mincaye Indians could actually act like Waodani. And then we got an invitation to go to India because some pastors over there were being persecuted trying to plant Christian churches in staunchly Hindu areas, and they wanted grandfather to come teach them how to do dentistry as a door opener to the gospel. I explained to them that that was impossible until somebody who didn't know it was impossible sent his passport to the Indian embassy, and they gave him a visa. So we went to India. We call this little video before and after, and then we'll wrap up.
The people who speared his father to death when he was just a boy asked Mincaye to return to the Amazon jungle to live with them as a man. Masters of their own world, they wanted to learn skills from the outside world that would enable them to care for their own needs and the needs of their people. Joining the space age with the Stone Age is not easy. With two-way radios for telephones and the Amazon's grocery meat department running wild, there were major adjustments to be made on both sides of this experiment. But to grandfather Mincaye and the Waodani God followers, the saints were family. They wanted to help their own people, and they wanted Steve to train them to be able to help them. On the opposite side of the world, other God followers heard that the Waodani had learned to fix and extract teeth. Pastors in India wanted to learn these skills so they could show their own people God's compassion for both their felt needs as well as their spiritual hurts. So ITech and the church in Louisville sent a training team. Training began with anatomy, bone, tooth, and nerve structure, and even blood supply. Then the pastors began with hands-on training, learning sterilization and giving each other shots of anesthesia before even learning how to set up the high-tech equipment that they would be using. The reaction in rural towns was incredible. Communities that had persecuted and even killed one of these Christian pastors now welcomed them with open arms. People turned out en masse to celebrate their first ever dental clinics. There was a special element in this high-tech training course. With no healthcare experience, the Indian pastors were skeptical that they could learn critical dental skills in just 10 days. So they contacted Steve and asked him to bring grandfather Mincaye with the team. If Mincaye could learn to do this, they believed they could too. But Mincaye hesitated to interfere until two trainees began working on a woman who really needed oral surgery. Not even our training dentist wanted to do this one. An infected tooth had eaten into this woman's jawbone, and there was a good chance it would be broken in the process of the extraction. Now Mincaye went to work like an old pro, decisive but extremely gentle. Steve held the light and we all prayed. We wondered that day what these people would have done if things would have went wrong. But they didn't. Mincaye pulled that impacted tooth without even breaking a root. Mincaye wasn't done. He knew this woman had a problem much more serious than just a bad tooth. He thanked Wainui for allowing him to pull her tooth and then asked the Creator to clean her heart so she could see his very good trail. In review of the day, Steve wrote in his journal, I looked at Mincaye's gentle hands and realized these are the same hands that once drove spears into my dad's precious body. My dad died for those hands. As Aslan said in the Chronicles of Narnia, when a willing victim dies in a traitor's stead, death really does look backwards. You too can use your hands to turn death into life. We at ITech would like to show you how you can become part of the IDENT training program, training Indigenous people basic life-saving dental skills as a door opener for the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ.
If you saw Mincaye acting up a little bit when he was watching the video, as soon as we came back from India, he grabbed my wife Jenny and said, the India place food not being good it is. He grew up in a culture that has no spices, didn't even have salt. And we ate curry almost every day. So he said, if I go back there, I want to take plantains and manioc with me. I was down in the jungles just a year ago, and I heard a challenge from a Tikuna tribesman. There were 45 tribes gathered. I'd like to pass on Eli Tikuna's challenge to you students here today. He asked in this group, assembled about 2,500 people from all over the Amazon jungles, he said, I want you people who are Tikuna to stand up. And they did. He said, do you remember what the missionaries told us? They told us not to beat our drums because we used to beat our drums to call the evil spirits. And then they told us not to dance because we danced to appease the evil spirits. And then they told us not to sing our songs because our songs bragged about us and our songs should only be about God. And he said, they brought us the gospel with their culture, but we needed the gospel in our culture. And he said, now I say to you, Tikuna, when you go out to teach people God's carvings, don't try to make them Tikuna. God has not called us to make people Tikuna. He has called us to make people like His Son, Jesus. Young people, when you go out, or when you stay here and send others out, don't try to make people like us in North America. That is not God's call. And then Eli said, my brothers and sisters who are Tikuna, those of you who are standing, if we are going to reach the people in our world for Christ, we have to be willing to suffer. How many of you are willing to suffer? And a bunch of them sat down, but some of them stood standing. And he said, and we have to be willing to die. How many of you are willing to die? To take this message to other people like us in the Amazon. It's time that we reacquainted ourselves with the value of suffering. It's time that we made the answer to this extreme call to a radical life. Not for our good, but for the world's good. I'd just like to ask you students, don't do it for the people around you. But are you willing to suffer? Are you willing to die for this gospel? God won't call many of you to do it, but we have to be willing. This isn't a cushy thing. We've made it into that. It is not a spectator sport. Are there any of you here this morning that really, really either are willing to or want to be willing to? Would you stand with me? And I have another challenge. This one is mine to you. The North American way has become, we write our story and we ask God to edit it when it gets a little bit out of whack. That is not what the book says God has offered to do. It says that He wants to write our story. I dare you to stand up if you're willing to let God write your story and let Him make sense of it. Not all the chapters will be easy. What He promises, though, is that in the last chapter, if not before, that's when He'll make sense of it. Will you let God write your story? All right. Let's let God write the story. Let's wait for the last chapter. Money,